Everybody, it is now 6:30, and I will call to order the regular meeting of the Keene Zoning Board of Adjustment. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and the city website. The video is also posted on the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meeting email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, please make all remarks through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the board is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room, there are two right there at the desk, and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. As a reminder, the minute taker is participating remotely this evening. Board members, please make sure to turn on your microphone when speaking. If the minute taker is unable to hear, they will ask that you speak louder or turn your microphone on. So we have a number of hearings tonight, and I'd like to start off by taking a couple out of order. Oh, first we're going to introduce the board members. I'm Joe Hoppick, I'm the chair.
Jane Taylor.
Richard Clough. Michael Welsh.
And Mr. Gorman is not here tonight due to, I guess he's on a family vacation. We're going to first review the meeting minutes from November 7th, 2022. This is the one I believe that's incomplete to a degree. Anybody have any comments on it?
I wasn't present at the meeting, so I can't vote, but maybe I can move that we accept it. Does that make sense?
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
I wasn't at the meeting either, so I'm going to have to
So I guess
abstain.
Rich and I are pretty much helpless. I don't remember what any of these inaudibles should say. I've looked at it a couple times.
If I may, Mr. Chair, if we have two board members present tonight that are unable to vote since they were not in attendance, I would recommend tabling this till the next meeting when a third member of the board is here to be able to have a quorum voting.
We need 3 votes, that's correct. Corinne, is there going to be a hard time with the city clerk's office about this? All right, if the consensus is to table the November 7th, 2022 minutes, we will table them. And that means we'll go on to the next date. March 6, 2023. Attorney Taylor, did you have some corrections?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have just 3 very minor things, and I'll cite to the line 382. It says Vice Chair Taylor stated that what they are proposing is imminently reasonable. I think the correct word should be eminently reasonable. Though imminently reasonable sounds interesting. Line 889. It says American School of Gymnastics, then it has T with an ampersand T. I think the correct sort of representation of that should be T with a lowercase n and then an uppercase T again. And then the third one is line 926, and this may just be me being a frustrated editor, but the sentence reads, MFS's mission is to take care of people on a given month. I think that should be in a given month.
All right. Anybody have any issue with those corrections or any other corrections? We can entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
And I'll second that as amended by Attorney Taylor's remarks. All those in favor, raise your right hand. The minutes are passed, March 6th. Okay. As I was alluding to earlier, then we'll get on to the hearings. We're going to take two cases out of order because it's our understanding that there'll be a request to continue them. So we'll first take up ZBA 2303, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Fippert. I'm here on behalf of Sampson Associates LLC, and we are requesting to be continued to the May meeting.
Is there any discussion on that? Does anybody want to make a motion? Attorney Taylor.
I guess the correct form would be to continue ZBA, let me get the number right, 23-3, request for a variance for property at 32 Optical Avenue, and continue it to the May 1st meeting.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor? It's continued. And Jim, you're also here on 2304?
That's correct, and I'm also requesting that be continued to the May 1st meeting.
Attorney Taylor?
Sure. I move that we continue ZBA 23-04, petition of Sampson Associates, again for variance for property located at 32 Optical Avenue, and continue it to the March 1st meeting.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And do we have anybody here on 2311 and 2312?
Good evening. Eli Lano from Bernstein Schur in Manchester on behalf of the applicant.
Good evening.
I would make a request to continue our two variances, or did you open both or just one at a time?
Well, it's probably cleaner to take them one at a time, so we'll start with 11.
All right, I would make a request to move that to the next scheduled monthly meeting of this.
May 1st?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Mr. Chair?
yes.
I am going to have to recuse myself on both ZBA 23-11 and 23-12, so I will step down.
Okay. Let's take care of that piece of business first. We have 3 members left to vote on this motion. Or somebody make a motion?
I can do that.
Yep.
I move to continue 23-11 to the May 1st meeting.
I'll second that. All those in favor? Okay.
I did have one other comment on that. Thanks to John in the planning office for bringing to my attention that in the application, I had a scrivener's error where I refer to that as 0 Old Gilsum Road. The other parcel is in the assessor's maps as 0 Old Gilsum. This is 0 Gilsum Road. And due to that mistake on my part, we did notice correctly, but we're gonna renotice just with the correct name to make sure that no one was served incorrectly.
So number 11 should be,
That should be
0 Gilsum Road?
0 Gilsum Road.
all right, and what is 12?
0 Old Gilsum Road.
Okay.
So I got a little bit of, I just kept writing the same thing and failed to correct my mistake. So I thank John for pointing that out to me.
That's noted then. Do you want to make a motion with respect to your docket number 23-12?
I would make a request to continue to the May 1st hearing date.
Okay.
Move to continue 23-12 to the May 1st hearing.
I second that. All those in favor? It passes unanimously.
Thank
All
you.
right. You're welcome. So at this time, I'd like to call up case number 2309, petitioners Jeffrey William T. Conway and Matthew Conway, and represented by Jim Fippert of Brickstone Land Use Consultants LLC, who request a variance for property located at 8 Page Street, tax map 553-018-000-000-000, in the medium density district. The petitioners request a building with 2 dwelling units to have 3 parking spaces where 4 parking spaces, 2 spaces per dwelling unit are required per Chapter 100, Article 9.2, Table 9-1, minimum on-site parking requirements of the zoning regulations. Mr. Fippard?
Thank you,
Well,
Mr. Chairman.
maybe we'll hear from the city first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 8 Page Street is zone medium density. It sits on a .07 acre. It was built in 1923. Total livable square footage is 1926 right now. This is a request for an ADU, which would add up to 800 square feet of living space for this. There were no variances on file for this.
All right. Anybody have any questions? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify for the board tonight that as an ADU, the state RSA's going to dictate that the city cannot use a density calculation that we would in most cases. So there's some limitations, and why Mike mentioned the 800 square feet right now. That'd be the maximum size of the accessory dwelling unit that they want to construct in the basement of this property. That's why you'll see that this lot, in most cases for a regular true 2-unit dwelling unit, this lot would not meet those dimensional requirements, but because of the state RSA for ADUs, we're not allowed to, municipalities are not allowed to use that calculation for an ADU. And then our zoning code does not differentiate at this point a difference between an ADU or a regular dwelling unit when it comes to the parking calculation. Hence why the applicant's before you tonight for the reduction by 1 space.
Okay. Any questions of the Attorney Taylor?
Thank you. When you mentioned that the floor space of the house is, what did you say, 1926, and an up to 800-foot ADU, so does the square footage of the ADU get subtracted from the overall square footage, or is that included in it? Or how does that get calculated?
The 800 square feet, up to 800 square feet would be in addition to the 1926 that already exists. So the basement area right now is 1290, I believe it was, on the assessing records. So 1,290 square feet in the basement. But again, they haven't submitted for a permit they can only go up to 800 square feet. So it could be 500, it could be 400. I'm sure we'll hear it from the applicant, but just wanted to make you aware.
So that whatever number it comes out to be will be in addition to the square footage you mentioned?
That is correct.
Okay, one additional?
Sure.
My other question is, and I tried looking it up, but I guess I didn't look it up well enough. Is there on-street parking permitted on Page Street? I thought it would be in an ordinance somewhere, but I couldn't find it.
I could, while the meeting's going on, I can try and take a quick look on the ordinances. I know there is a lot of on-street parking that occurs on this street.
Yeah.
It is a very tight street. I think you could actually see that from the picture that was taken for this application, showing you how the parking kind of looks on the street already. I don't know if on-street parking is prohibited, but I'll make an attempt to look through the ordinances while the board is in discussion.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Fippard, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Fippard. I'm here on behalf of the owners of the property at 8 Page Street. That's Jeffrey Conway, Benjamin Conway, and Matthew T. Conway. They are requesting a variance to allow 3 parking spaces on this property, where 4 parking spaces would be required in the event that an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, is added in the basement of the building. This building was previously owned and occupied by Dr. Bosa, a local podiatrist. Many of you may have known him. And he operated a home business. He had an office in the basement of that building. And that's the space that they would convert to an accessory dwelling unit. So it already has a separate entrance into the building. It's approximately 700 square feet of living area. This would be a one-bedroom unit that they're proposing to add, and the building, the ADU would be occupied by Benjamin Conway, who is part owner of the property. And it is a requirement that owner occupy the premises where an ADU is added. So this would meet those requirements. It would meet the space requirements. However, it can't meet the legal requirement of 2 additional parking spaces for the accessory dwelling unit. The houses on Page Street are all very old. Most of them are constructed prior to 1900. If you look at the properties, the buildings occupy most of the lots. As you go down the street, that pattern repeats over and over again. And if you look at the parking patterns that exist on Page Street, and I hope some of you did have a chance to drive down, at almost every residential dwelling, they're parking in front of the building. And that's because there's no room to park behind the buildings or more than 1 or 2 cars alongside the building because of the size of the lots. This is an existing non-conforming lot in the medium density district. Medium density requires a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. This lot is just over 3,000 square feet in size. So it's less than half the size of a regular lot in the medium density district. And you'll hear more about that when I get to criteria number 5. So they are proposing, there is an existing paved driveway along this southerly property line. It is exclusively for the use of 8 Page Street. And I measured the length of that paved driveway. It's paved all the way to the rear property line where there is a wire fence. And then I just measured up to the sidewalk, and it's about 73 feet long. So you actually can fit 4 cars stacking in that paved driveway. However, it doesn't comply to the parking location requirements in the new land development code. They require that we not park a car in the front yard of the property. So they don't want cars extending beyond the front line of the building into the front yard of the property. So I thought about applying for a variance for that location. And I discussed it with John Rogers briefly and decided I would just go with the 3 parking spaces instead of 4. If you look up and down the street, everybody parks in front of their building.
Sorry about that.
And it's because they have to. They don't really have a choice. There's not enough room to park behind the building or along the side of the building without blocking somebody else in the driveway. So that's what they would be doing here. They would be stacking in their driveway, and they can fit 3 spaces legally in the space that they have and meet the location requirements. And I decided to pursue the variance to allow just 3 spaces instead of 4, because this will be a single bedroom ADU that they're adding. And the occupant will be a single resident, Benjamin Conway, and he has 1 car. That's all he needs. So it meets his purposes, and it would allow him to enjoy this property that he is part owner of. So I'll quickly go through the criteria for the variance. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. And I believe this is true because accessory dwelling units are actually encouraged now to try to help address our severe housing shortage. But also, it's a permitted use under our current land development regulations in all residential zones, permitted outright. But we still have to comply with the parking requirements, so that's why I'm here tonight. And as I said, this will be a single bedroom unit in the basement of the building with a single occupant using that space with a single car. So it meets his needs on the property. If he does have a visitor that comes, or if the residents have a visitor that comes, they're gonna park in front of the building just like they do today, and just like they do up and down the street. When I drove up and down the street, I didn't see any posted no parking signs. So if it's not posted no parking, then it's permitted. And that's the way it works in the city of Keene. It has to be restricted, posted as restricted, in order to restrict that parking. So they would be no different than any of their neighbors. If somebody comes, they would probably park in the front area You can see there's no grass in the front because people have been parking there repeatedly. But given the housing shortage in the city, I feel that an ADU in this location is appropriate, and it is in the public interest to allow it. I don't see any benefit to the public to not allow an accessory dwelling unit in that existing basement space, especially where so little work has to be done to convert this to an accessory dwelling unit. It is on city water and city sewer, and those services are adequate to support this use in that building. The second criteria is that the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. And in this case, the spirit is to allow accessory dwelling units where it's feasible, anywhere in the residential zones in the city of Keene. And I think this fits that spirit of the ordinance. We have room in the building that's existing. It used to be an office space, and they would convert it to the accessory dwelling unit. It has its own separate entrance, so it works very well. There will be no changes to the exterior of the building, so that there won't be any visible change on the street. And the only issues we're left dealing with is this parking issue. And that's why I'm here before you. And again, as a single bedroom unit with only one occupant having one vehicle, I think this still meets the intent of allowing an accessory dwelling unit in this location. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. This building, it has a large living area, over 1,900 square feet, and the single-family dwelling just 2 stories above that basement level. And this basement level, as I said, was previously a home office for a podiatrist and existed there for many years. I don't see any benefit to the public to denying the variance. We're not going to change the appearance of the building. We're not going to change the appearance of the property. We're going to use the existing driveway where it's located today. So I feel that granting this variance does substantial justice for this property. The values of surrounding properties would not be diminished. As I described, the character of the neighborhood, and hopefully you had a chance to drive it and look at it yourself, it's all single-family homes primarily on very small lots, and that's the character of this area. Most of these lots are all undersized, well under the 8,000 square feet that's required in the medium density district. So we're not going to change that. We're not going to change the appearance of the building. They don't have to change anything. As I said, there's already an exterior entrance to this space, and it will comply to all the other requirements for accessory dwelling units other than that 4th parking space on this particular property. So I feel this will have no negative effects on surrounding property values. It'll be more the same than what's there today. The next criteria is the unnecessary hardship. I think the special condition of this property is obviously the size of the lot. And this is existing. It's a very old lot. It existed prior to 1900 when the house was built. And I found it interesting, back then there were no cars. They weren't worried about parking because nobody had a car before 1900 when the house was built. So this situation was created as zoning was created well after the house was built and occupied in this location. The requirement for 2 parking spaces for an ADU unit, I feel that the existing ordinance doesn't recognize a situation where an ADU may have a single occupant and only need 1 space. The code doesn't require that, but it also just doesn't recognize it. So I feel in this case, the code is inadequate and contributes to the hardship that would be created if this variance is not permitted. The use is a reasonable one. Accessory dwelling units are permitted outright in residential zones. This is a permitted use. We feel it does fit the property because they don't have to alter the building. They don't have to add on. Their alterations will be interior only. And we're not expanding the driveway or changing the outside features on this property today. So I think it is a very reasonable use and it fits in this neighborhood. And it certainly gives the property owner the enjoyment of his property, which I think he's entitled to. Finally, the proposed uses are I just addressed, I'm sorry. Part B, and I don't need to repeat it all. It's the same argument. This is a pre-existing non-conforming property, became non-conforming due to changes in the zoning regulations. The current zoning doesn't recognize that an ADU could have a single occupant with a single vehicle, and therefore it should be allowed, and it shouldn't be held against the owner. I think that helps to create a hardship. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Mike?
Mr. Fippard, I'm looking at the picture that came with the packet and trying to orient myself about where cars park. And if I'm looking at the black car in that picture, I'm seeing that it's just about at the flush with the front of the building. Is what you're describing a situation in which the driveway goes back far enough that 3 cars could fit back there before
Yes.
the end of the cars flush with the building?
Yeah, you're correct. In the photograph, the black car that's located to the left of the house is the existing driveway. And in the exhibit that I submitted with the application, I measured the length of the paved driveway from the rear of the property to the front of the house, and it's 59 feet.
Okay.
And 59 feet is adequate to stack 3 cars. The zoning code requires a minimum 18-foot length for each parking space,
Okay.
which would be 54 feet.
One more question.
Oh, go ahead.
The same picture shows 2 cars in the front of the building. And from the description that you've given, I'm gathering that those cars are parked illegally. And if, if law enforcement was feeling especially aggressive that day, the tickets would be issued for those cars.
Yeah, the cars that are shown parking in front of the house, I think that's gone on for a long, long time. And I think that predates the changes in zoning regulations that prohibit cars parking in the front yard. I park in front of my house. I have to. That's where my driveway leads up to my garage. I'm in the front yard. My house was built in 1896, and I'm not going to build a parking space into the rear or to the side of my house. When I look around Keene, there are thousands of single-family homes in the same situation. This regulation that requires parking to the side and to the rear, it came about not that long ago, and it was primarily for new construction and in commercial and office uses. And it wasn't applied to residential. And it wasn't until we updated the land use code that this became a regulation now that we're all faced with. So if you drive around the city of Keene, you're gonna see thousands of properties that are non-conforming, made non-conforming by that change in the regulation. So I
Okay.
don't consider that illegal parking. I consider that non-conforming parking.
Okay. One last, just to.
Sure.
So if we found, if we had compliance with the plan that you've promoted, we would probably do away with the non-compliant or the parking in front of the building, and except in the situation where you say somebody's visiting or someone just doesn't know that you park on the side. Okay.
Attorney Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should note that my familiarity with that, the section of the code that doesn't permit parking on your front yard as opposed to in the street in front of your house. I became familiar with that in the 90s, so it's not a new regulation, and there was quite a bit of enforcement issues around King State College. So, I mean, that's been there for a long time. When I drove down to look where the property was, there was a car that was parked in the street. There were a couple of along the length of the street. It's a very short street. And that basically made the street one lane. I mean, you couldn't get 2 cars passing the car that was parked on the street. So if there were enforcement and you weren't allowed to park on what was left of the front lawn, doesn't that create a problem in the neighborhood requiring parking in the street? if you have, for that fourth car?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I drove up and down the street several times to observe how it operated. And there were 2 pickup trucks parked on one side of the road, and it was only 1 lane open around it. But I did it, and it works. I mean, it's an existing situation. We wouldn't be creating a new situation. In my discussion with the owners of the property, what I said to them was they shouldn't park on that area that used to be grass, that they should park on the paved driveway. Even though the 4th car would extend beyond the front of the building, you're on the paved driveway, you're not blocking the sidewalk. They have 79 feet from the end of the driveway to the edge of the sidewalk. So there is adequate room to stack 4 cars. That's why I almost went in that direction and pursued that variance rather than this variance. But in my discussion with staff, I think they're considering reducing the parking requirement for ADUs. That may be a future zoning change that we're gonna see. We just didn't wanna wait that long. They're hoping to occupy this unit this summer. But, and I can't speak to the future whether that'll happen or not. I think we can safely park 3, a 4th car if we had to, and the 4th car would be non-conforming, but it would be on the existing paved driveway, not on a lawn area.
Mr. Rogers?
Just some quick clarity for the board. So looking at Chapter 94 of the city ordinances, the Page Street is not on the list of no parking, one of the no parking streets. There might be other rules that the police would enforce for, as far as maintaining travel lanes, but as far as the city ordinance for no parking on certain streets, Page Street is not listed. The other problem is, just to clarify a little bit for you, is that currently the way the ordinance is written for parking is no parking can be created either in the front setback or in front of the house, whichever is less. So in this situation, this house probably, let's just assume it doesn't meet the front setback anymore, which would be 15 feet, I believe, in this district. Say the house is only 10 feet from the street. They could actually park, as long as it was behind the front of the building, since that's a lesser number. Also, the other issue with going for the other variances as far as being able to park in front, the city ordinance does speak to parking spaces needing to be 18 feet long. So this property doesn't, even with we're talking, probably less than a foot, but there is not enough of a distance there to actually create 4 legal parking spaces per the ordinance code, was the conversation that Mr. Fippard and I had. Because this is just, I believe the diagram that you showed was like just under 70, where I believe like 70, I think it'd come out to like 71 feet would be needed. So that was the reasoning for going for this variance as opposed to being able to park in front. One of the concerns also to think about with just to speak to the on-site, the on-street parking, certainly at this point in time, Keene has the winter parking ban, overnight ban. So being, relying on somebody to be able to park in the street overnight during the winter time could be problematic for them and their car getting towed when they needed to plow. And secondly, the problem we have on this side of the street, what you'll note is where the car to the right is parked, that's actually the sidewalk. So that is a concern too. And again, that's part of the design of the street. The fact that they didn't put any curbing in lends itself to people parking like that, which again, that's something that happens in a lot of the neighborhoods where they're narrow, and we see people parking like this in multiple locations around the city.
Any other questions or comments? I have a question before, but I want to ask the other members.
I have an additional question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, the variance, runs with the land. So ostensibly, if the property were to change hands, you could have more than a single person living in the ADU. So I guess I'm a little concerned with your emphasis on there just being one person living there, because we have to think about the future too. And
I mean, they're gonna construct a 1-bedroom unit for the ADU. So it is possible a couple could live there, and maybe they would have 2 cars. And yeah, they're gonna have a parking issue. they can park in the street and get away with it. I guess for now you can, because it's not restricted. But, I mean, how do you single this one property out when you look at all the properties on the street and they're all in the same situation? So I'm just,
Go ahead.
Yeah, and finally, I guess that goes to my last question, which is the hardship. The special condition, which you say is a small size, has to be able to distinguish it from all other properties. But all the properties in this are small size, so how is that a special condition?
and you and I have always disagreed on this hardship argument. You feel it has to be single and unique. I feel there could be 100 properties like this that are suffering from this special condition. And I think that it's a condition that was created when the city of Keene created the zoning laws and changed the lot sizes and changed all these requirements. And cars came along. Like I said, when this property was first developed, there were no cars. So none of that was an issue. All that came about as our society progressed and developed these regulations. So I think an undersized lot is a special condition. It's not the only undersized lot in the city of Keene. And, I mean, if they would just change the zoning to high density instead of medium density, that would help. It would still be undersized, but it wouldn't be more than 50% undersized.
And
So
that's exactly what the case law says, that, you know, if the problem is you've got, all of them are undersized, then change the zoning. Don't just give a variance to each property as it comes along. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Are you all set? I have two questions, Mr. Fippert, and I just want to get your reaction to it. If a condition were imposed that restricted the occupancy of the ADU to one person, what would your thoughts be on that? And similarly, if a condition were imposed that restricted the property to no more than 3 cars at any one time, what would your reaction be to that?
I think it's fair. I mean, I had this discussion with the owners, and I said, you know, they've got to realize what they're asking. The board doesn't want to set a precedent, and they may want to impose conditions. And I suggested to him limiting the occupancy of the ADU to one person and limiting the cars in the driveway to 3.
I'm talking about the cars on the property. That point,
That would be hard to
it'd be hard to enforce.
enforce. It
Well-
would be. If somebody comes and is the 4th car, they're in the driveway, I mean, is code gonna come along and say, ha, I got you, and you're a 4th car on the lot and write them up? I don't think so. I mean, that's just,
You don't know John.
I do know John.
Okay.
John would give him a warning. and say,
Yep, that's
"Look,
probably
there's a
true.
restriction on this property, you gotta move the car.
Yep.
And he wouldn't write them up. But I think that's fair. I understand the position we're asking the board, that we're putting you in, and we're asking you for this variance. It creates difficulties. And unless they can change the zone, like Jane suggested, or change the parking requirements for ADUs, which may happen, I think it's fair to restrict it.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Fippert? Seeing none, we'll move to requesting comments of anybody opposed to the application. And I do have one email that I'll read in a moment, but is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak against the application? That's next. I'm just following this in order. We have one email from Karen and Tom Shabbat addressed to the community development from April 2nd. And their comment reads as follows. I have a concern about the parking in front of the house at 8 Page Street, as well as the house at 12 Page Street. I've already seen 2 cars parked on the front lawn here, often partially blocking the sidewalk. This can be dangerous for sidewalk users, especially for Franklin School students. It is even more dangerous as this house is near the corner with Beaver Street, and cars turning onto Page Street often don't stay in their lane. I don't know how this can be safely addressed. Thank you. And that's the end of the comment. So if there are no other comments opposing the application, I would entertain comments in favor of it, if anybody wants to make any. And if there are no comments, then we'll close the public hearing and begin deliberation. Anybody want to start? I'm happy to get the ball rolling. I don't disagree with Mr. Fippert's comments that ADUs are generally in the public interest because of the housing shortage. So generally, I think there's support for the application being in the public interest. But this is a parking variance, not an ADU variance request. I also don't see that the parking application will drastically affect or negatively affect the character of the neighborhood or raise any significant safety problems. And it may well do substantial justice for the owner versus the gain to the public. But I do have an issue with the last criterion. I think Attorney Taylor is correct in terms of the debate between Mr. Fippert and Attorney Taylor in terms of what the law requires. Unnecessary hardship means that owing to a special condition of the property that distinguishes it from other properties in the area. So it's not the one-size-fits-all problem. It has to distinguish it from other properties in the area. And if other properties in the area are similar, then there's no distinction. They're all suffering from the same special condition. And that does not make it an unnecessary hardship. The correct remedy is a change in zoning, not a variance. So I have an issue with criteria number 5 in this case. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
I share that opinion. I think that, the correct long-term remedy is change in the zoning as opposed to the variance. I guess I haven't heard any evidence as to how the other properties that are subject to the same constraints are getting along, what their parking situation is and whether they're in compliance or out of compliance. And so I'm satisfied that, if we address this one with a parking variance, that would serve, that would be a just solution. I do see the desirability of the ADU and more housing as in the public interest. And my linkage of that plus the parking is that minus the parking variance, the ADU becomes a non-viable option. That they would have to supply 2 extra parking spaces, and there's no practical way to do that. At least the argument that has been made, and I find it kind of compelling. So I'm satisfied with number 1. I'm satisfied with number 5, and
You are or you're not?
I am.
Okay. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I disagree. I don't believe it's in the public interest because of the existing congestion in the area. And just because as Attorney Hoppick said, it's a parking question. Yes, it's related to the ADU, but not every property is really appropriate for an ADU either. I'm also concerned because, you can say now that there's only going to be one person living in it, but once you give the variance, down the road, you could have 3 cars belonging to the upstairs tenant, and if the owner continues to reside in a basement ADU, and maybe it's a couple and they have 2 cars, now you've got 5 cars, and they're parking on the front lawn. So I just think that this is a very poor area for this. And I don't think it will do substantial justice, because I think that having additional parking that would be in the street really is a negative. There's already a bad situation for parking on that street, and I think this only would exacerbate it. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any testimony regarding the value. I don't know, maybe the city could get a lot more income if it enforced the parking rules. But anyway, I shouldn't joke about it. But, and I already indicated that I don't see that this property is distinguished from any other property in the area, in its immediate area. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Well, let's entertain a motion with respect to this application, then we'll go through the criteria. Mike?
Move to accept the application for variance to 8 Page Street, ZBA 2309, with the added conditions that the ADU be occupied by one tenant, and the other condition was that the total cars in the property can not exceed 3. If I'm not mistaken, I think those are the conditions.
Okay. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with a condition limiting occupancy. I don't think we can do that on variance.
I'd be willing to withdraw that part of the conditions.
And what was your second condition?
Second was 3 total cars. If I'm, is that correct?
That's what you said, yep.
But they're asking for 4.
Four spaces are required, 2
Right.
spaces per dwelling unit. They want a building with 2 dwellings to have 3 parking spaces where 4 parking
Right.
spaces are required.
Right.
So,
I just said it backwards.
okay. So just so the record's clear, we have a motion to approve conditioned on, not conditioned on occupancy limits, but conditioned on limiting the 3 cars to the property?
Yes.
Is that what everybody understands? Okay, seconded by Mr. Clough, all right. So number 1, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Does anybody want to comment further on that? All those in favor, raise your hand. 2 in favor, all those opposed? 2 against.
If I may, Mr. Chair, can we just make sure to, does the minute taker need names or anything for these votes, or unanimous, or any of that type of, they don't need names, correct? Okay, sorry, I apologize.
That's all right. Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, I thought at the last meeting we had, when we had a split vote, that we needed to give the names of the negative votes for the minute taker.
Yes, I do have to record that in the minutes.
The negative votes were Hoppick and Taylor.
Thank you.
We'll clarify that as we go, so you don't have to worry about that again. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. All those in favor? Same 2 are in favor. And opposed? Same 2 are opposed. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. All those in favor? 2. All those opposed? Same 2. If the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. All those in favor? That's 3 in favor. Opposed? Attorney Taylor opposes that. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because, 1, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. All those in favor of that? 2 in favor. Opposed? Attorneys Taylor and Hoppick oppose. And whether the proposed use is a reasonable one. All those in favor? 2. All those opposed? 2. Attorneys Hoppick and Taylor again. I don't believe B applies at all here. Do you?
No, I don't believe it applies because they still can have reasonable use of the property.
Right, okay. We'll skip over that. Now, turning to the main motion on 2309, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? It was 2, and 2 against. So 2309 fails.
Do we need a positive motion to reject? Oh, it's,
We don't have 3 votes in favor. So I'm not,
I'm sorry, if I may, Mr. Chair, so I think with the 2-2 vote, I know that it was the motion was to approve. Certainly the board can make a motion to deny and vote on that. You would not have to go through all the criteria, but you should
Okay.
still make a motion to deny and make a vote on that.
does somebody want to make that motion? Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Okay, I'll make a motion to deny ZBA 23-09 for variance at 8 Page Street.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor? Raise- 2. Mr. Rogers.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, so with a 2-2 vote, basically the board has taken no action at this
All right,
point in time.
I believe the motion fails.
I will review, but I do believe
Okay.
that the RSA has changed, and it would require a motion of, again, a tie, I believe, is no action. We'll certainly let the board know, and we'll certainly let the applicant know. Again, it might be something that if the applicant could come back before the board next month if Mr. Gorman is back on the board, back from his vacation, he could have a 5-member board to hear, and then it'd be harder to have a tie, but it's something I would like to confirm. I just want to make the board aware of it. I do believe the RSA had changed a few years ago to require that there be the majority of the board for a vote, for an action to have actually taken place. So,
Perhaps you could ask the city attorney to rule on that, because
I will, in fact, I'm going to be the one I'm going to blame, because I think he's the one that had the RSA changed to reflect that. So, but I will certainly check with the city attorney. I just want to make the board aware of that,
Yeah.
since,
The statute does specifically say you need 3 votes, affirmative votes to pass anything.
and I think they then changed to take any action, it needs to be 3 votes, I believe, the majority of the board.
Yeah, one of the reasons I disagree is because you couldn't bring the same application back under the Fisher rule. So,
Well, again, we'll confer with the city attorney on it. I just want to make the board aware with that vote that there might be an additional step that might have to happen, but, and like I say, we'll follow up with the applicant to make them aware of what Attorney Taylor says, and we'll let the board know if he certainly agrees with Attorney Taylor as well. So we'll let the board know.
All right, having said that, I guess we can set that one aside and move on to the next application. Does the administration want to speak to 2310?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 809 Court Street is zoned commerce. It sits on 1.81 acres. It was built in 1986. The building square footage is 19,800 square feet. It did receive one variance in 2016, was approved 5-0 for an 8-foot setback where a 20-foot setback is required. And they were required to remove the entrance shed off of the backside.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Matt, the Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, can you provide more detail, because I really didn't understand your description of what they're asking for where?
The description of the variance that they're seeking now?
Well, it's a special exception.
Oh, yeah.
No,
that's-
there was a variance in 2016, or there was
Oh,
a
okay.
variance that was approved by the ZBA in 2016.
Okay.
This is going back into the records, what I'm
Okay.
reading to you are the record files. The ZBA file was 16-11, and it was approved 5-0 for an 8-foot setback on the back rear side, where 20-foot is required. Does that help? This is Court Street, correct?
So that's wrong again. So if I may, so the board, this is to allow for an industrial use?
That was what was approved back in the day. That's an old application.
Okay, all right.
History.
Yeah, Mike's just trying to give you a little bit of the history of the property, but yeah, so the application before you tonight for the Court Street is the special exception.
Let me just read the introduction here. Petitioner Lennon, or I'm not pronouncing that right, Industries of Keene, represented by Jim Fippert of Brickstone Land Use Consultants LLC, requests a special exception for property located at 809 Court Street, tax map 219005, 0000000, in the Commerce District, and owned by Hillsborough Capital LLC of Keene. The petitioner requests to permit light industrial use in the Commerce District per Chapter 100, Article 5.1.5 of the zoning regulations. Mr. Fippert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Fippert. I'm here on behalf of the property owner, Hillsborough Capital LLC, and also the applicant, Linen Industrial Services. So this is a request to allow a light industrial use on a property in the Commerce District. And this is something new, I think, under the new Land Development Code. I've never done one of these in the 46 years I've done this. The Linen Industrial Services is an existing high-tech company here in Keene. They're currently located down on Production Avenue in about a 6,000 square foot building. It's actually at 22 Production Avenue after the car dealerships. They manufacture specialty machines. So this isn't a mass manufacturing of parts for the auto industry or anything like that. These are specialized machines that are manufactured for individual users, and they do many different things. And Mr. Peter Lennon is with me tonight. He's the owner of the business. And if there are specific questions, he can answer those. But I was given the privilege of a tour of their facility down on Production Avenue so I could see and understand better what it is they do. And one of the machines that he showed me a video of that they manufactured was actually for Badger and Gilson. And you're all familiar with Badger and his products. And they created the machine that actually fills his little tubes of lip balm. And it's something you don't think about, but how do they do that? Does a person sit there and inject it in? No, it's all automated. It was pretty neat to see. So it's interesting that we have facilities like this in the city of Keene, And this is something, it's a clean industry, it's a high-tech industry. They create the parts and the machine itself, they create the software that operates it, they install the machine in the new facility. So it's a wonderful company that we have in our area, and it's a type of company that our master plan and our comprehensive plan encourage in Keene. We want to encourage these people to stay here, to grow here, to come here if they're not located here already. So I'm happy to work on this application. The first criteria for the special exception is that this would be consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations, the land development code, and the city's comprehensive master plan. And it complies with all the applicable standards in the land development code. This is an existing building, as staff said, was built in 1986. I actually did the site plan for this building back in 1986. I've been doing this too long. And there's been several different uses within the building. Most currently, it's an athletic facility, and there may be 50, 60, 70 kids participating in athletic activities and training within this facility today. So this is a big change to go to this light industrial use, and I think it's a very positive change because it's less intense, less traffic, everything is less about it. But it's clean, it's high-tech, and it's what we want in our community. Access to this property is from Court Street here on the left. This is an existing driveway. There are 73 paved parking spaces on the property today, which is far more than what they need for this facility, but it is adequate for what their proposed use is. They would be moving from a 6,000 square foot building to a nearly 20,000 square foot building in this facility. So it gives them much more room for warehousing their products, the products they need to manufacture their specialized machines and to conduct their activities, and it'll give them room to grow as well. Currently, they have 21 full-time employees that work at Production Avenue, and all those employees will come with them to this facility if they're approved to relocate here. They operate Monday through Friday. The business hours are from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., so they have a flex schedule. Employees arrive usually between 7 and 9 a.m. in the morning, and they're leaving between 4 and 6 p.m. in the afternoon. They don't have regular hours on evenings or weekends, although on an as-needed basis, they may be there into the evening on some nights or on a Saturday if the business needs require it. Back to number one, the manufacturing facilities that they conduct would be wholly inside the building. There's no activities outside the building. There's no storage of product or machines outside the building. Everything would be inside the building, and that's important. In number two, the proposed use will be established, maintained, and operated so as not to endanger the public health, safety, or welfare. As I said, they have 21 full-time employees, 73 existing parking spaces, so parking is not an issue. They're not going to be parking in the streets or the driveways. There would be no need for that. They operate regular business hours, Monday through Friday, and the building has plenty of size for them to grow into, to store their products inside, to store their machines inside as well. I don't believe there will be any excessive noise, fumes, or vibrations. I didn't feel it when I was at the premises. On Production Avenue, I could see drilling machines and see them operating, but nothing was loud, there were no fumes. It was a nice, clean operation. I believe staff has been familiar with that facility as well and agreed that this meets the criteria as a light industrial use. Most of their deliveries to this facility would be by UPS or FedEx, and very few large trucks. The larger trucks come once or twice a week delivering metal products, and they usually come on a flatbread truck. And there's plenty of room for them to drive in, back down through this parking area and load and unload near the rear of the building. So I think this is a low-intensity use which won't endanger the public health, safety, or welfare. Certainly doesn't generate excessive traffic or create excessive noise and fumes. Number 3, the proposed use will be established, maintained, and operated so as to be harmonious with the surrounding area, will not impede the development, use, and enjoyment of adjacent properties. Adjacent properties, just to the north, is a commercial building. It has multiple tenants. There's a pizza restaurant. Freihofers has an outlet in this location. They also deliver from this location for their bakery products. And there's some type of a health care facility in the south end of that building. The American Legion is located to the south of this property, and they have their own parking lot, their own facilities. These properties all share a common service road that runs parallel to Court Street. You're probably all familiar with it. I think everybody's been to this property at one time or another. But you can access it from this curb cut. There's another access that's shared with Walpole Savings Bank and the dentist offices that are located to the north of this building. And then you have the service road that runs parallel to Court Street. So their parking is separate. It doesn't interfere with the service road operation at all. And as I said, everything is contained within the building, so you're not going to see activities that are disturbing. You're not going to feel vibrations or have fumes. They're going to disturb the use of the abutting properties. Again, it's normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., with very few exceptions. So I don't think it'll have any effect on the abutting land uses. Number 4, the use will be of a character that does not produce noise, odors, glare, and or vibration that adversely affects the surrounding area. Once they're in there and operating, you're not even going to know they're there. They don't generate enough noise doing their machining and operations within the building to be a nuisance to anybody in the surrounding properties. Number 5, it won't place an excessive burden on public improvements, facilities, services, or utilities. Court Street is a busy road. They're going to be reducing the number of people utilizing this property on a regular basis by eliminating the athletic activities that are ongoing today. Again, they only have 21 full-time employees. Hopefully they will grow into this facility. Even if they double in size, the traffic they would be generating between 7 and 9 a.m. and again between 4 and 6 p.m. is not such that it's going to affect the safety or capacity at Court Street. So I think there's a good positive change if this is allowed to proceed. They do utilize city water and city sewer. This building is serviced by city water and city sewer, but they won't be using it to excess. They don't use a lot of water. They don't generate a lot of wastewater. And there's certainly adequate parking on the site. Number 6, the proposed use will not result in destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined to be of significant natural, scenic, or historic importance. Again, this is an existing developed lot. There are no natural features that are going to be disturbed. They're not going to change anything. They do want to paint the building and change the color, but I think that's positive. They may add an overhead door at the rear. But other than that, there's no changes to the site and no threat to historic features that I'm aware of. Number 7, it won't create a traffic safety hazard or a substantial increase in the level of traffic. And I already addressed that. When they move in, they'll have 21 employees. Even if they doubled in size, still going to be less traffic than what's being generated there on a regular basis today. And the athletic activities, by the way, go into the evening and they're on weekends as well. So this is going to be diminishing the traffic in this area if this use is permitted. So I hope you can agree and allow this use as a light industrial use in the Commerce District.
Are you all set?
I'm done.
Do you have anybody have any questions of Mr. Fippard? Attorney Taylor?
I guess my question actually, excuse me, involved basically the traffic. I agree, even if you only have 21 people all there all at the same time, it's not a huge amount of traffic. But I'm kind of curious as to what, like delivery trucks, and you say maybe an overhead door in the back, how that would work?
Deliveries to the facility today utilize primarily this curb cut from Court Street. This is directly opposite the curbs cut into the Court Street condos across the street. And they drive straight into the facility to the back. They back up here and then drive out. If it's a flatbed or a tractor trailer, what they do on the property, they drive into the property to this front parking area and they back in down to this end of the property. They don't use a loading dock at Lane and Industries, so they would use a forklift if they're lifting something off a flatbed truck, which could drive in and out of the building through the overhead door. So it's, if this were a, when I design a site plan, we look at things like delivery vehicles and how would a tractor trailer get in and out. If this were a busy retail operation, or even this athletic facility, when a tractor trailer is making a delivery, I get concerned. How do they get in? With the athletic facility that's been there, I've witnessed kids getting out of cars and running into the building to go to their event, whatever it is, carrying their gear, their baseball bats and balls and gloves. You don't want to see that type of activity when a truck is backing up into an area. So this is going to be a vast improvement over what's there today to allow for safe deliveries into and out of the property.
Yes.
Yeah, will this be going to planning board because of change of use, or is it just something that'll be administrative because there's no, not much external change?
That would be the community development director's, he'd have to take a look at it. With the change of use, I'm doubtful that it would be just a straight up administrative approval. It would most likely, at least at a minimum, have to go to the minor project committee for review, and then ultimately it could be, this property also has a current existing site plan that's getting ready to expire because the sports complex had originally anticipated on doing additions and doing a bunch of other stuff, so that site plan's getting ready to expire. So I think that there'll probably be again, at a minimum, the minor project committee and very possibly to the planning board because of the change of use that would be occurring.
But that site plan that you just mentioned that's going to expire has nothing to do with what they're proposing here, correct?
No, it really, what it was is it was a weird approval process they went through to try and, because the sports facility had had to develop their business for a certain amount of time before they could get the financing they needed for the expansion they were anticipating. So no work had actually been done towards that site plan.
Okay.
So it would actually revert back most likely, I'm not sure what the date is on this site plan, but it would revert back to the previous site plan that had been approved is what it would revert back to. But the use itself would trigger at least a minor project or possibly planning board approval.
Okay. Anything further, Attorney Taylor? I have a question, Mr. Fippard. What's the growth capacity of that building in terms of how many employees could work there? What would be the maximum capacity?
To go from 6,000 to 20,000, there's obviously plenty of additional capacity. They do have 73 parking spaces, so I would anticipate he could double his workforce, and after that, he would probably want to look at going a second shift or multiple shifts, and that's usually what they do. There isn't room on the site to add on to the building. It's pretty much all maxed out as far as lot coverage is concerned, so I think it's reasonable to expect that he could as much as double his workforce utilizing the existing parking that's on site today.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions? All right. We'll take, do you want to add anything more?
I'm done.
Okay. We'll take anybody in opposition to the project proposal. Corinne, we didn't get any emails on this one? None? Okay. Seeing no opposition, does anybody want to speak in favor of it?
Yeah, just one thing. This is Peter Lennon. He's the business owner.
How do you do? So have a seat and just state your name.
Okay.
I think you can sit down
So
there.
my name's
Turn-
Peter Lehman, and I'm with Lehman Industrial Services, 22 Production Avenue in Keene. And so just one minor thing, just wanted to correct the record on the the name on the application here was Lehman Industries. The owner of the building will actually be Lehman Holdings LLC. Then my company as well, and it'll be just for the purpose of owning the building, which will be used by Lehman Industrial Services. So just wanted to clarify that.
Well, thanks for
And,
that.
Also, any questions about what we plan to do, I'd be happy to answer those. I've invited Mr. Rogers to our existing facility to show him what we actually do. So, he's seen that, and so we're primarily an engineering firm, but we also design what we build. So we employ mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, software engineers, and then also the skilled labor to construct the things we design. So if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yes,
Just to maybe clarify some of the questions you had earlier and apply them to here, what would you say your percentage of your existing plant now is devoted to manufacturing, and what percentage of it is, say, storage or warehouse?
On the employee level, about a third of our employees are overhead, sales, marketing, that kind of thing. About a third are engineering, and about a third are manufacturing. In terms of space usage, in our current facility, about a third is manufacturing space. So when we, and inside the building, we've added some additional vertical space and such. So we actually have a little more than 6,000 square feet that we utilize. In the new building, manufacturing will be about a quarter of the building, of the 20,000 square feet. Engineering will be probably maybe another third, and then ancillary functions will be the rest. We are looking to put in a robotic demonstration center that may consume a nice chunk of that space also.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Attorney Taylor?
Thank you. Just one quick question. In the application, it said there'll be no outside noises, fumes, vibrations, or disturb the abutting properties. I guess my concern is, it may not disturb the abutting properties, but what kind of, I don't know, exhaust or emissions does your manufacturing process
There's none at all.
produce? None at all?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If one of us were standing outside of your building at, say, I don't know, 11:30 in the morning, and manufacturing is full ramped up, what would we hear outside?
Probably nothing.
Okay,
There's the kind of manufacturing we do. So most of what we do is engineering and design and then assembly. So all of the manufacturing of the components, the actual machining and welding and fabricating, we farm out to other companies. And then those materials come into us and we assemble them. So what we actually do on site is like 90% assembly. We do have a small model shop. That's a machine shop with some lathes and mills and things. That we use for prototyping and for fixing stuff that may have, needs to be changed. So our machining is actually virtually, it's totally quiet, basically.
Okay.
And we don't create any waste at all.
Mr. Welsh?
All these questions have gotten at, helping me imagine this place, this facility in place. And the only remaining one I have is, suppose it's the day to take delivery of one of the assembled machines and to send it off to a client. What would we see? Would we see a UPS truck pulling up and the flat and the?
No, it would typically be like a flatbed truck, And typically, the riggers bring their own heavy equipment, their own forklifts and stuff, and they take the equipment from our floor, put it on that truck. And that is very infrequent. We probably do about 15 to 20 projects a year. Most of those projects are small enough to be a, maybe a 6x6 crate or something like that, that would, go onto a truck. There's some equipment we build that's larger than that, and then the riggers manipulate that and put it on a trailer.
Okay.
So typically, it's a single trailer that would take away the finished product.
All set? I don't see any other questions from the members. Well, thank you very much for both of you.
Sure.
I'll close the public hearing and we'll proceed to deliberations.
I suppose I could go one by one, but I can say that, just generally speaking, I'm satisfied as I visualize this facility in place, that none of the negative scenarios described in the special exception criteria are likely to come about. And it seems like a fairly good candidate for the exception, the variance that they're looking for. And the noxiousness, the fumes, all those things I tried to imagine, and I don't see them, so.
I was doing the same thing as you were when I was listening to this, and I agree with you completely. I don't think this is, a special exception by definition is a permitted use if you meet the extra criteria. So it would be, that in and of itself, in my mind, satisfies the first one, whether the nature of the proposed application is consistent with spirit and intent. I think it is. I also think that the use will be maintained and operated so as not to endanger public health, safety, or welfare, for all the reasons we heard. A quiet operation, a clean operation, a low-density operation. And it is consistent with what is up there. There's a bank, there's some apartments across the street, I suppose, but again, it's not going to be offensive to anybody there. And there is the bread place too. So it's all commercial activity, and it'll fit right in. And we heard a lot of information about noise, odors, glare, vibrations that don't exist. So again, that's satisfactory. I didn't hear any information that the use would place an excessive burden on public improvements, services, or utilities. Water and sewer are the only two, and it's a large building, so it's that housed an athletic facility with a bunch of teenagers in it. I don't think I should need to say more on that. It will not result in loss or destruction or damage of any feature, natural, scenic, or historic importance, so. And I don't see any information that would lead me to believe that a traffic safety hazard would be created on that area of Court Street, so I'm satisfied that these criteria are met. Attorney Taylor.
Thank you. My two real concerns about this were, one, traffic and, trucks and things like that. And the other concern was whether or not there would be any kind of emissions or external effect. But from what we've heard this evening, it appears that, if anything, there'll be less traffic, and it will, be internal to the building. So I think it does meet those concerns that I had.
Does someone want to make a motion? 2310.
Move to accept ZBA 2310, 809 Court Street.
First special except, okay. Seconded by Mr. Clough.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, Mr. Welch mentioned to accept. I just want to make sure that he intended to, or means approve.
Approve.
Yes. It'll be so interpreted. Except to mean approve. All right, we'll go through these criteria one at a time. Whether the nature of the proposed application is consistent with the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations, the land development code, and the city's comprehensive master plan, and complies with all applicable standards in the land development code for the particular use. All those who agree? Unanimous. The proposed use will be established, maintained, and operated so as not to endanger the public health, safety, or welfare of the area. All those in favor? Unanimous. Third one, the proposed use will be established, maintained, and operated so as to be harmonious with the surrounding area and will not impede the development, use, and enjoyment of any adjacent property. All those in favor? Unanimous. The proposed use will be of a character that does not produce noise, odors, glare, and/or vibration that adversely affects the surrounding area. All those in favor? Unanimous. The proposed use will not place an excessive burden on public improvements, facilities, services, or utilities. All those in favor? Unanimous. The proposed use will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined to be of significant natural, scenic, or historic importance. All those in favor? Unanimous. The proposed use will not create a traffic safety hazard or a substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity of the use. All those in favor? Unanimous. On the main motion then, all those in favor of approving 2310, raise your hand. Unanimous.
Thank you.
The application carries. Now, that leaves us with our final application for the night, number 2313. Mr. Fipper, you get to go home.
Sort of. He did the plan.
Oh, I can see, I spoke prematurely. Let's have the city staff speak to the issue first, and then I'll read the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may, Mr. Chair, if I could ask for the chair to read the
Read it
narrative
first?
real quick, just, I think that could be a little more clarity, because that was, I think, what happened last time, I think, when it wasn't read and you heard variance when it was a special exception.
Okay.
If you could, please.
Sure enough. 2313, petitioner Carlisle Park Avenue LLC of Keene, represented by Eli Leno? Leno, sorry, of Sure, Sawyer, and Nelson of Manchester, requests a variance for property located at 800 Park Avenue, tax map 227-002-000-000-000 in the Commerce District. The petitioner requests a parking area within 8 feet and 10 feet of the proposed property line per chapter 100, Article 9.4, Table 9-2 of the zoning regulations. Go ahead.
800 Park Ave is located in the Commerce Zone. It's located on 5.76 acres. There are 2 buildings on this property. Building number 1 was built in 1980. I'm only giving workable square footage. There are some ancillary areas like basements and mechanical areas, but it's about 18,000 square feet for building number 1. It's actually 17,892 square feet. Building number 2 was built in 1957, and it has 19,035 square feet. There are, again, some additions off of that and decks and ramps, but we only included the way it's quoted as livable square footage. There are 2 variances or previous, there's a special exception and a variance. One was, these are pretty far back, a special exception on October 6th of 1969 to permit cashway sales, lumber storage, and Keene Ice Creamery. So that was a light industrial use, and that special exception was granted. And then there was a variance from ZBA in 1977, is actually March 28th of 1977, was granted to allow for light assembly operation. So,
Any questions? Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, could you clarify which is building 1 and which is building 2?
sure can. If you're looking to the, I guess, the south of the property or southeast of the property, which is the larger L-shaped building, which has Pizza Down Under in it, if you're familiar with it, and the one to the northwest, according to the screen, is the ice cream shop, or what was the ice cream shop. I think it's something else now, but that is building number 2. So the smaller building is the older building, the bigger building is the newer building, which was built in 1980. The other one was 1957.
Yeah, I just asked because if building 2 is the one that started out kind of like as an office, my first knowledge of it was a chiropractor's office. I'm surprised that it's got larger square footage than,
You added a 0. It's 1,900 square feet.
oh, phew.
Yeah, that's right. 1935.
Okay,
1935. So it's
that sounds a little better.
1,935 square feet.
And-
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, sorry about
And,
that.
I'm glad I kind
clarification.
of went, whoop. The other thing is, I think we had a variance a couple of years ago on the smaller building that allowed,
You're correct. I did miss that. I went into the history property file. I should have gone into the newer files. There was a variance for setback on the front for an awning canopy. That is correct. It's about 3 years ago.
And that had
Two,
to
maybe
do with
two.
rough terrain on the lot, right, if I recall? Uneven terrain?
Correct. And some covering for parking to get to.
Right, okay.
so,
Yeah, sure.
could you, my understanding is this is basically anticipating a subdivision.
That is correct.
Could you show where the lines are anticipated to be, or is that for the applicant?
Corinne can pull it up. We do have it on the file. If you want to.
Oh, yeah, I gotta be able to read that, you know? Okay,
That's in the packet though, right?
Yes.
I'll have better luck here.
so does the darkened line indicate where,
If I may, Mr. Chair, yeah, so the dark line is the showing of the non-conforming pavement setback. So the way the wording is for this, basically what the wording in the narrative that was put forth or what the requirements are, what the applicant's seeking is really basically a 0 setback for the pavement, since this is really an existing condition. This pavement's already there, and so they're looking to subdivide this property off. So if this variance were to be granted, it is actually going to be some variances that are going to be attached to the 2 properties if the subdivision goes through. There would be a variance granted for both properties because they both are going to have pavement right up to property lines. And like I say, but it is currently an existing condition, minus the setback question, but certainly can let the applicant speak further to that. But it will apply for 2 properties. There's not a tax map number to associate yet unless a subdivision happens.
Are we all set with city staff? Please proceed then.
Thank you. Again, Eli Lano from Bernstein Sure in Manchester. And not that it's relevant, but I am a 2001 grad of Keene Middle School, so it's nice to present in town. As noted, the shaded portion here does essentially highlight the lot line. If you have parking less than 2 acres of, I believe, of blacktop, you're required to have a 10-foot side setback, and then 30,000 square feet or less is required an 8-foot setback, so that's where that is shown. Then obviously the parking lot terminates and the lot line continues here. So we're left with 2 compliant lots, but for this existing pavement if we do it this way. I'll get into the criteria, but I think it makes sense to go over the property a little bit. The piazza is still in the smaller building along with, I think it's Eat More Cakes. So it's a bakery, these are allowed uses, and then there's a mix of commercial type uses over in the larger building. Unique property in that we have dissimilar sized buildings, dissimilar uses, again, all allowed uses, but it would make sense if you had retail here to have sort of a compound, but having these two disparate uses on the same lot sort of reduces the flexibility of the owner, especially if a tenant were to want to buy one of these at the end of the lease, et cetera. It doesn't necessarily make sense that if you have an office use over here, you also are willing to buy into an ice cream shop location and a cake bakery. So I'm trying to sort of simplify all of this, but we have an existing parking lot that works well, and our goal would be to change basically nothing. Our goal would be to change nothing about that on the ground, but to use certain legal and engineering mechanisms such that we could divide this and then probably, I would expect, do a reciprocal parking easement just in case someone was parked in this building one, wanted to go get an ice cream cone. They're not needing to either drive out and come back around if we were forced to tear up pavement, or so that if they used the second use, they weren't parking in the wrong place for it. If you've been to the lot or looked at the sort of Google Earth or overheads, this over here at the north side of the property is all green area. No changes expected to that because there is a slope and there's wets down there, which is why the parking lot, you mentioned that there was a variance based on the slopes, et cetera, previously. It does sort of come back, you drive in and then come down and around for these back parking spaces, whereas this is more on a higher level. So there are some topographic concerns on the site as well. I don't know that those are necessarily as relevant based on the fact that this lot is already paved and no new paving is anticipated, requested, or expected. So again, to get into the variance criteria, this would not be contrary to the public interest. It's an existing lot. We don't expect that the average user of this parcel would notice any of these changes. These are sort of changes to be done on paper between this request and then the subdivision. We're looking to maintain safe vehicle and pedestrian circulation on the site, and again, parking lot works has been vetted both when it was laid out and by time bears that out. No expectation of any changes to the public health, safety, or welfare here, certainly not negatively. Spirit of the ordinance, again, this is compliant, both lots in every dimension, but for this requested 8 and 10 foot setback on each side of the proposed new lot line won't have a visible impact, and the character of the neighborhood will not be changed. Number 3 is certainly the balancing test. Again, this will be largely unnoticed by anybody, except that it'll create a benefit to the owner and applicant who will have the opportunity to potentially sell one of these. There's nothing necessarily considered right now, but general flexibility on the fact that this is a 5 acre plus lot in a zone where 15 acre lots are required. So trying to just set this up so that it can be used as is deemed fit eventually if one or both should be sold. Value of surrounding properties, again, we're not discussing changing uses, we're not discussing adding paving, we're not discussing bringing in more cars, etc. Really can see the only impact on other lots here would be that if one of these were to sell, it would provide favorable comparables in the area, although there are a number of different uses in this area, including apartments, etc., which are not one-to-one comps, but no negative effect on neighboring lots. In terms of the unnecessary hardship and the distinguishing conditions, I believe I've mentioned some of them, but it is a very large parcel in a zone where they're not necessarily required to be 1,500 feet, third of an acre, the small required, and we have 5.5 acres here. Again, two principal structures that aren't necessarily similar, where it's not unusual to have two commercial buildings look at each other, where one of them's Target, one's Dick's Sporting Goods, or whatever the case may be at that parcel. But this is a little different, where one of them is 18,000 square feet and one of them is less than 2,000 square feet. So they make more sense sited on their own lots neighboring each other than they do as one parcel. And then again, the proposed uses here are all allowed and existing permitted uses, and therefore under the Malachi Glen case, those are inherently viewed as reasonable. I would be happy to answer questions about the property or about any of the criteria. I also do have Don Carlisle, the owner, here with me if anybody has any questions that he may be able to answer.
Thank you. Do the members have any questions? Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, could you give me a rough estimate on how much of the 5+ acres is actually usable because of the wetlands and the brook and all that? Do you have any kind of guesstimate?
Do you have a sense?
Jim Pippard. I'm the background support staff on this application, working for Mr. Carlisle. Approximately half of the property is encumbered by floodplain from Black Brook, which passes through this area, and a large wetland area, which are the dots connected by lines in this portion of the property. So it's about half of the land area.
Thank you.
Anything further? No questions? I don't have any questions. I thought the application was very thorough.
Thank you.
Does Mr. Carlisle want to add anything? Come on up and state your name and.
I don't have.
Yeah, I'm not. You don't have to if you don't want to. So.
No, it's fine. I'm Don Carlisle, and just was looking to have the property subdivided so that if at some point we would want to sell either the ice cream shop or the office space. I don't have any intentions of doing it, but we'd have that flexibility.
Okay.
And I don't think I can add a lot more to it. But any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
I don't think we have any, which speaks to the thoroughness of the application. I don't see anybody in the audience except Mr. Fippard, and he's not going to oppose it, so.
I certainly hope not.
You keep him here any later, he might. Does anybody else want to speak in favor of this? There being no questions, no more speaking, I'll close the public hearing. We'll begin deliberations.
I'll
Mr. Walsh?
jump in. And again, I'll go sweeping through the various criteria in one set of comments. I think that, you know, this is a fairly straightforward purpose in the applicant's wish to subdivide and the necessity of doing this. And I think that, you know, they've adequately explained how it meets all the criteria. I think, you know, the final number 5, you know, the potential of hardship, if not granted, is I think also stated, and that is that you would have very disparate kinds of uses and disparate kinds of buildings for sale in one package, which I think makes, if it were to sell, which makes it a more difficult task than it needs to be, especially if someone's just looking to open an ice cream shop of their own.
Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I think we had struggled with this parcel a couple of years ago setback issue. And I don't think any of us realized at the time that it was all one parcel, because we kept looking for another map and lot number, but it was all one parcel. I think that one of the issues here is, and the reason why I asked about the, how much of the property is usable, is that if you wanted to rejigger it, if you subdivided and had to meet the setbacks and put parking in different places, you'd be kind of constrained because of the wetlands and floodplain. So that, creates its own unique issues within the parcel itself, let alone compared to other parcels in the strange universe that's out in that area. Let me get back to the criteria. So I certainly think that this, of all the applications we've had recently, meets the substantial justice requirement. I don't see that there would be any negative impact on the public, and certainly the benefit to the property owner in trying to make some sense out of the mess that's this particular property is probably a very good idea.
Mr. Clough?
I would agree that looking at this and how the subdivision would be proposed, that it's a extremely reasonable way to subdivide this property, and certainly nobody is going to notice where the property line is when they're buying ice cream or anything like that. And trying to impose a setback in something like that would create just one snarl of, it would just be extremely difficult to subdivide this property without doing it in this manner. So I agree.
Yeah, and I agree with all the comments. I think you're trying to take two principal structures on one property and, as they say in the application, remedy that through a variance request and a subdivision makes a lot of sense. It's in the public interest to allow an owner of property to preserve the property in a sensible way that doesn't make it worse and really doesn't change it at all either. So that's the beauty of the application. So I think the public interest criteria is satisfied. I don't think there is any alteration to the character of the neighborhood. There's no danger to health, safety, or welfare. And I agree with Attorney Taylor on the substantial justice test, because the gain to the public of denying this would be there's no impact on the public here. All the gain is to the individual, so the balance strikes in favor of the individual. And as we've learned, once again on this property, there are special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. And denying the variance would result in an unnecessary hardship, because the reasons for the setback on a pre-existing lot don't apply. Those provisions of the ordinance really don't apply to this lot. And that you can't make that application, the definition of undue hardship, any more clear. So I think it's satisfied. Any other comments? Sorry?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
if the board could, I didn't really note anything for criteria one, if the board could just speak to criteria one for.
Oh, I thought I spoke about public interest.
Criteria two, I'm sorry.
Oh, the essential character, you know what we missed, there's nothing in this application that would diminish property values. I think that's the one we missed. And I apologize for that.
Thank you.
I don't see anything from the information presented that would have any impact on any values in that area. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, and I think what Mr. Rogers is getting at is, in the spirit of the ordinance, it's a commercial, pocket surrounded by, residential areas, but it's certainly not distinguishable in the nature of the businesses there from what's on the island that's created between Summit and Park. So, it's not doing anything untoward in that regard. And I'd also like to add on criteria 5, that it's a reasonable request.
Reasonable use. Does anyone want to make a motion on this application? Mr. Walsh?
I'll move to approve, not accept, 800 Park Avenue.
We can do both.
ZBA 23-13.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Clough seconds it. Motion having been made and seconded, we'll go through the criteria. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. All those in favor? It's unanimous. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. All those in favor? Unanimous. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. All those in favor? Unanimous. If the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. All those in favor? Unanimous. Owing to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in an unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. All those in favor? That too is unanimous. And the proposed use is a reasonable one. Unanimous. Your application is approved, gentlemen. Oh, we got it, sorry. On the main motion, all those in favor? Now it's approved unanimously.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, good luck. Mr. Rogers, any new business?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
No communications, miscellaneous? Okay, perfect. Then we're adjourned.